Today we're talking about a better way to approach event sponsorships. There we go. I'm Angel Brunel, and I spent about 30 years, I don't, maybe you know this, I spent 30 years in the nonprofit sector, most of them in leadership positions with organizations that primarily serve youth. And it was the last 10 years that I spent fundraising. And I worked in direct service positions, other management positions, and leadership positions. And as you might be aware, I was responsible for a number of events throughout that career. You might guess everywhere from generating $40,000 to $400,000 in revenue. And I'd say with most of the events that I uh, oversaw, ran. We exceeded our goals and sometimes by a number that even surprised me. So I'm here to share with you some of the things that I did to get to that place. But first, maybe you could just drop in the chat name, organization, and where you're coming in from, if you care to share. Let's see if I can see the chat. Yes, Project Learn from Downtown Lowell. And Kelly from the food bank, thank you. Yeah, so my school, my screen is sometimes reluctant to advance. So my goal here is to help you develop the processes and techniques to make securing sponsorships easy and more beneficial to both the organization and the sponsor. Okay, so here's what I'm going to be talking about today. So just generally how events fall into fundraising, and each of you have different goals for fundraising, which is great. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why behind companies, why they sponsor events. I think it's important to understand that strategy when looking for sponsors. How to design your sponsorship strategy, building a strong prospect list, assigning and managing outreach, then at the event, delivering a great sponsor experience and turning sponsors into long-term supporters. So as a little bonus, I'm going to send to you afterwards this checklist. So if you're feeling like I need to jot down everything she says I should do, you don't have to worry about it. I already did it and I'm going to send it to you. And that's something you can, and you'll be able to modify it and stuff. It's in Canva, so you can make it your own. So have you ever heard this phrase before? Let's fix this budget gap by putting together a fundraising event. Um, and I'm here, like, as when I talk about the role of fundraising in our overall organization strategy, I like to think this way, and this is to be the look on your face when you hear that, that events should not be a budget stopgap. They should be mission aligned. They should be financially strategic, so fitting into your overall annual budget and very intentional in understanding what the purpose of the event and what the expected outcomes of the event are, whether it is purely financial or there are other outcomes. And so there's a lot of angles we can take as we look at this. Today, again, I'm focusing primarily on sponsorships and the financial implications of those. So we're going to start with just talking about why do companies choose to sponsor events? And I like to dive into this because I think it's important to understand the mindset so that you understand why you might not be getting some companies to sponsor and why you see sponsors at other events that aren't sponsoring yours, right? So probably the number one reason, and I'll keep coming back to this, are the relationships with volunteers or staff. So because they have a connection to the organization. Also, there are some sponsors that want and rely on community visibility. They want people to know that they're doing good things in the community. Some companies, it's part of their corporate values to be to be involved in the community, whether that's through volunteering, attending events. More and more, we're going to see companies that are concerned about employee engagement, especially companies that employ younger generations. And so they are doing it primarily to make their add something to their benefits for employees. Marketing. So a lot of companies, this is something that's also can get confusing, is many companies that are sponsoring your events are doing it from a marketing budget, not a foundation or a giving budget, right? Not a fundraising type of budget. And then community reinvestment. So you both probably know that banks, in order to be FDIC insured, a bank has to give a certain percentage of its profits back to the community. So that's why you see so many bank sponsorships out there. Hi, Crystal. Welcome.
Hi.
Um, uh, so, so as I mentioned, probably the number one thing that drives sponsorships are the relationships that the companies have with your organization. So someone in your either your staff or your board members or your committee members have a personal connection in the business. And so they've been able to secure that sponsorship. This is why when you look at sometimes other organizations, like do you ever look at somebody else's event and you're like, why can't we get that company to sponsor us? Probably they have a board member that is closely connected with that company, right? Number two is because someone asked. And this sounds, I feel like, really pithy, but do you know the number one reason people don't give, right, is because they're not asked. And it sounds like, oh, well, of course, obviously. But the truth of the matter is, when surveyed, why didn't you give to XYZ organization? Because they never asked me. And this will be kind of a thread that I'll weave through as well, because I feel like it's so obvious and yet so easy to overlook because we focus so much on who we know and what we're used to, and it can be easy to overlook that idea that, well, maybe they're not giving because we just have never asked them. And then also because you've connected with somebody who believes in the mission. And so this is why your board and your committee matters so much. And when you're putting together your committee, it really is important to be thinking about those connections that they have within the community and their ability to leverage those connections. Um, that being said, I don't want you to think that you can only approach sponsors that you have relationships with or personal connections with. You can make cold requests, but that's when you want to do some research beforehand and at least understand their motives. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is kind of like start from the big picture view and narrow down into the strategy. So the first thing when we think about the being financially strategic when we're planning events is what is our overall financial goal of the event? And so presumably there's a number in your budget, in your operations budget, that has this event is going to generate this much revenue, right? And so you're looking at all the different revenue sources that are going to make up that total number. So that can include your sponsorships, maybe ticket sales, if you're doing a fund to need, auctions, donations, raffles, games, whatever else it might be. And so you're going to come up with a goal. And for the purposes of our today, we're going to talk about an event that we have a $50,000 goal for our budget. I've been on a number of event committees, and then I've also talked to clients quite a bit. And I always ask, "What's your event goal?" And my least favorite response that will get me to roll my eyes every time is when you say as much money as possible, or even worse, a boatload. And I'm like, "What's a boatload? A canoe, a kayak? What are you talking about here?" And again, it seems like a very obvious, well, of course we want to raise as much as possible, but you cannot build strategy around such a loose goal, right? And you will see here how we take this and just break this down very much. And so that goal, hopefully you came up with it based on perhaps previous events. If you're doing a new event, you're basing it on what your budgetary needs are. But let's make sure that it's realistic. So if we are basing it on a previous event, maybe we're increasing it by a certain percentage. Or if you're doing a new event that you're thinking about, um, what's possible out there. It's unlikely that a brand new event is going to raise $250,000 out of the gate unless you're in a big city with a lot of big connections. Okay, so we're going to talk about $50,000 here today. And so we're going to break down that total goal into each of those revenue streams that are making up our event, right? And you'll notice here that sponsorships and fund need are the greatest portion, like they're like 80% of this budget because that's where you have the most opportunity to grow and increase things. Ticket sales are going to be limited by the amount of people that you can have in the room. Auctions and donations and things are typically not huge income generators for an event. Sponsorships and fund need. So we've broken it out. We have kind of a line item here that we're working with. And and most of it going into sponsorships. And I will address why. So we think about the expenses too. We need to know what this is. So we're thinking about all the direct expenses, catering, promotion, marketing, and so on. But the thing that often gets lost, oops, sorry, my clicky's not working. It's here. Well, I'm just going to move ahead and talk about staff time and opportunity costs. There we go. Staff time before and after the event and opportunity costs often get lost in the equation. And I'm just going to do some really, really basic and simple math for you, which would be if you had one staff person who was working 20 hours a week for 8 weeks on an event, and let's face it, for a big event, that's really, really underestimating probably the amount of time. That's over $4,800 in just their staff time, right? Which on this kind of event is 20% of the revenue. And then you're not also taking into account opportunity costs, which means opportunity costs are all the things that staff person could be doing to raise revenue that they're not doing because they're working on the event, right? So they might not be meeting with major donors. They might not be writing a grant. They might not be doing things that could raise just as much money or leveraging relationships, that type of thing. So you have to take those things into account as well. So back to, again, our goal here and our sponsorship goal of 30,000. So now we're going to zoom in on that a little bit. So here's a process I'm recommending kind of, and I'll explain kind of the order of why might do the things this way and some of the logic behind it. So first thing is to design your sponsorship levels. And again, you might be inheriting these if this is an event you're doing over and over. But a little bit of best practice with your sponsorship levels is to have no more than 5, ideally 4 sponsorship levels. If you have 5, I would say that the top one is a very elite one that you don't expect a lot of people to come in at, right? A presenting sponsor or what have you. Any more than that, and it's just very confusing on the paper, it's very hard to read and it's very hard to manage and keep track of. So this is a very common, I'm sure we've all seen this, the whole gold, silver, bronze. And then sometimes we also see sponsors that design it to fit in with their mission. So it's more their names and maybe even the design of the sponsorship materials align well with who they are as an organization. And then we're thinking about those sponsorship levels, and we're thinking about what are the benefits that are going to come along with those each level. And I've just bulleted a few things here that you might include. Everything from things before the event, which might be recognition on the event website. So we see now these platforms that we're using, like Kelly and I were talking about One Cause earlier today. They have built-in ability to put logos on that website, or maybe it's on your organization's website, mentioning them in your newsletter, social media post, so on and so forth. The really important thing here is to not promise things you don't have the capacity to deliver or the means to deliver, right? So, utilizing the resources you have. So, something that I see or I've been caught up before, and again, is social media posts. Like when you have a ton of sponsors and you promise them each a social media post, that's a lot of social media posts. One that's taking up the airwaves, but also that is taking up your time as well. So don't promise things that you can't follow through on because I can't really see me. Is it popping up? Yes, because the benefits rarely make the decision. They usually support the decision. And in fact, one time I was talking to somebody who works at one of the larger banks in town and sort of asking about sponsor benefits and things. And what do you think? And they said, you know what, to be perfectly honest, we don't always like it doesn't always matter. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Right? We kind of come back to those reasons that people sponsor, and in many cases, it's because of their connection to the organization and or because they want to be doing good in the community. I don't know, anything you don't see on this list that you've done that anybody out there has done that has been like well received by your sponsors? And you're welcome to come off mute and chat or drop it in the type it in the chat.
We have the unique ability of cute little animals. So we
Yeah.
offer kitten cuddle parties or canine coffee dates for the office for sponsors.
Love it. Yes. So really leaning into what your organization does that might be unique or something that people can't access. You can't buy that experience. And so that's something that might really intrigue a sponsor. And what I love about that too, Crystal, is that also is a great way to get a sponsor closer to the organization, to have an experience with your mission firsthand.
Yeah,
We're
it
actually
almost
trying. Oh, go ahead,
oh
Crystal.
go.
Sorry.
I was
No,
to
no,
say
you
it
go.
almost always results in an adoption
Mm,
also, or someone becoming a foster home. So they
yeah.
like really get like entrenched in the org.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Shamir, what were you
We're
going to say?
trying this out this summer. So we're trying out a summer like sponsor our summer programs as a
Hmm.
something new that we've never done before. So we're trying out um, and adding something which is like a special opportunity to collaborate on a signature student facing experience. So
Yeah,
getting the sponsors in front of some of our students. And so we'll see. We haven't, we're just really getting this out right now. So we'll see if it's attractive or not. So
great.
similar, not as cute or cuddly as kittens though.
We're not cute and cuddly either. But
Kelly,
we
were you going to share
do,
something?
yeah, so we don't offer these like as part of our event sponsorships, but we do offer program sponsorships at the beginning of the year. And for those, we'll do something like you can sponsor the Operation Nourish program at a certain level, and we'll put your name or logo in all the bags of food that go home with the kids 1 week.
Yeah.
Or we'll put your name on one of the food pantry cabinets in one of the schools for a month, or something like that where it reminds them, I guess, where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I did have a slide at the end to talk about program sponsorships. And so I'm glad you all brought that up because that is another way for organizations that feel like events, they're just too event heavy. There's too many things to do and or they want to be brought closer. Again, like as we're shifting kind of generations in the workforce, we're realizing that millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha really like to feel connected to their community. And so employers are going to start looking for more opportunities to make that happen. Great. So I'm just going to popping back to our event budget and again, focusing on this $30,000 goal, we're going to start breaking it out a little bit. So next we've decided we're using presenting gold, silver, bronze sponsorships, and we need to come up with dollar values associated with each of those sponsor levels. Again, if you have inherited a sponsor format, then you're probably working with that, but don't be afraid to start increasing them over time, especially if you're getting a really good response. Um, And what we want to do is we need to do this because we're going to break this out into a sponsor pyramid soon, which is going to help us visualize where the revenue is coming from, plan our outreach, and then again, avoiding that guesswork of how many, how are we going to get all these sponsors in? We've got more hit our goal, and it'll give us the ability to exceed our goal. Also thinking about, and I know many of you have done this before as well, is the kind of one-off sponsorships, like a photo sponsor, a dessert sponsor, video sponsor, and things where the only one company can purchase it, but they get their name attached to something that's going to be high visibility, and it's not going to be mixed in with all the other sponsors. So we're going to take those levels and again, just like our event budget, the sponsorship levels should be realistic. It's really challenging for me to see organizations that throw out a $10,000 presenting sponsorship when their highest level of sponsorship ever before was $2,500. That's a huge leap. And then that sponsorship goes unanswered, unless, and the exception to this rule is unless you already have one lined up, right? Unless you know somebody that's connected to the org that's going to take that sponsorship. So this is how we're building out our budget for sponsorships, is we're saying, okay, I think I can get one presenting sponsorship, 3 gold sponsorships, 5 silver, 10 bronze, but uh-oh, it doesn't equal $30,000. So I have a few choices here. I can increase the sponsorship price, I can increase the number of sponsors needed at each level, or I can lower the goal. And so in this case, I've reworked this budget with increasing the number of each sponsorship needed, right? So that's good. Now here is where I feel like sometimes it's tempting to sort of stop there and say, okay, committee, this is what we need. We need 2 presenting sponsors, 4 gold sponsors, but we're going to build it out even a little bit more. And we're going to use the same 3-time prospect rule that we use when we're doing a capital campaign or a major gifts campaign or whatever. That means that we need to identify 3 potential sponsors for every single one of those sponsors. So presumably that would mean, I'm trying to do math in my head, 12 gold sponsor prospects. And again, I'm going to use the presenting as an exception because at that level, you're probably going to already have identified people that are going to follow through with those sponsorships. So you're not prospecting at that level. You've got folks lined up for that. So we're really looking at these smaller levels, right? So that might mean 30 bronze sponsors. And I do intentionally put very, very much weight the lower level sponsor highest in the numbers, because that is where you are most likely to get a new sponsor, an incoming sponsor, a cold sponsor to show up for you. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're expanding the spreadsheet a little bit, and we're going to actually list out. Either you can start with, if you don't have a sponsor, if you can start with all those levels of prospect. I need 4 presenting prospects. I need so many gold, what have you. Or you could list out all of your potential sponsors. So your mailing list, whether that's taken from your database or what have you, and then you can assign them these levels. Like I think ABC will come in at gold again. I think this one will come in at silver. I think this one will come in at, I know that they're going to do presenting. I know that they're going to do this. These are people we don't know, so we're going to put them at the bronze level, right? So you're literally assigning a level to each of your sponsors. And I saw, Kelly, from your spreadsheet earlier today, it looks like you've been doing that work of assigning them the levels. And so as we look at where can we find these prospects? So maybe, again, you have an event that you've done in the past. Maybe you're starting up a new event. So as we talked about, your board members, companies, and affiliations. I really feel strongly that every single board member should be approached for, if they own a company, their company should be sponsoring. If they're otherwise affiliated, if they're on the board of a company, if they're connected to it, if their spouse works at a company, what have you, they should be willing to try to get a sponsor. A lot of board members sponsor as an individual. Great. Love it. Their affiliations. Also, your committee member networks. And as I said before, when you're putting together your committee, I would say at least 50% of the people on that committee should be people who are well connected in the community, have networks, and are willing to approach them. Obviously, your current or past sponsors. So those are probably the easiest to approach. Like I said, local banks, and those probably would be the easiest to approach cold if you haven't gotten bank sponsorships. Because as we talked about before, they have to reinvest in the community. The earlier you can get to the banks, the better, because they do distribute money until it's gone. We talked about looking at other events and their sponsor list and researching that a little bit because, again, as I said, some of their sponsors are going to be their board member affiliations, and so they're not going to be likely to sponsor your event, so we can be looking at it. And then finally, businesses with community giving programs. And so, as you all probably know, some businesses have funds set aside to support their community, and some do not. Some have different ways that they want to be connected in the community. Some do not care about the community they're connected in. And so researching and finding out who are those companies that are in my community that care about giving back. So I have a little method that I use, which is one is just to do a Google search for just corporate giving in a blank area. We're all kind of in the same area here, but there might be other people that watch the recording that are not. In this case, I put Dallas, Texas, and the Grantsmanship Center came up with just a whole list of companies with community giving programs. If you put in Boston, if you put in Lowell, you'll get Massachusetts. Then if I just look down this list, I might look down this list for city of headquarters that are nearby or close to us, and then just research them. So I put in Amy's Ice Creams. That's the next one that I did. And I got this nice little thing. So Amy's Ice Cream is apparently headquartered in Austin. I looked at their About Us, and I found this. There's a page for donations and giving. Clicked on that. They actually just give in-kind and certificates and donations. So they're not a great sponsor prospect, but maybe I would come back to them for an auction item. iHeartRadio was another sponsor that was on this list. And so then usually if you look at the menu, right, and you look at community giving, corporate giving in the community, what have you, that's where you're going to find the information about whether or not they sponsor events and how to how to apply. Unfortunately, iHeartRadio doesn't really sponsor events either, but they have like a volunteer program and so on. So somebody who might be located in the region of iHeartRadio might want to approach them in a different way. This is helpful research to do, I feel like, anytime because you're going to come up with potential grant sponsors, volunteers, and just understanding the companies. You could also reverse engineer it and you could put in a company that you know is headquartered in your community and again, just search their website for whether or not they have a corporate giving program. And the other thing is like Glassdoor and things sometimes will say, here's the top 10 employers in your community, and you can find those bigger companies that way as well. So it's just a way to research some of those cold entrees, ways to get connected with the community. So once we've kind of done that, and then we have this really robust list. Hopefully this is again an example. This is all Texas, so I'm not sure any of them are going to sponsor here in Lowell. But here we go. So now our spreadsheet's growing bigger, right? So we've got our company name, and now we've got the suggested level that we're going to make a request for them. And what's really key here is then this next piece, the solicitor. And so, sorry, I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I include everything. Um, You also might be able, some databases can do this as well, so that you don't have to have a separate spreadsheet. You can pull all of your kind of like company names and then just attach like a goal for a sponsorship event function. You can pull it from there, so you don't have to replicate it. Just want to make sure that that I'm clear on that. And that solicitor. So this is when your committee really can get involved. And I'm going to be fairly emphatic about this part of the process, which is I think it's very tempting to either A, assign solicitors in advance and then just say, hey, Angel, will you reach out to these 5 people? Or to send an email to everybody and say, here's the spreadsheet of all the sponsors that we want to approach. Please populate it with whom you're willing to reach out to. The thing that I have found the most effective is to literally sit in a meeting and read every single one of these and say who's going to reach out to them. You might have somebody in mind, like let's say that I know Crystal has a connection at 7-Eleven. I might say, Crystal, are you willing to reach out to 7-Eleven? Okay, so we could do it that way, but the goal would be that while we're sitting there in person, we walk away with a solicitor for every single one of these, not overwhelming people unless they ask for it. So I'd say 4, 5, 6 per person on your committee to be following up with, because you want it to be realistic for them. We know they're busy outside of what they're doing for us. We want it to be realistic, but also very trackable. And I would say more likely than not, your development staff and your ED or CEO are going to have people on this list as well. They should, because you should have relationships with some of these companies, right? So it should be comfortable to reach out to your, biggest volunteer, things like that. And I also want to emphasize as well that people don't have to know the president of the company to have a relationship. If your neighbor works in the mailroom and can take your letter and find the person to get it to, that's a relationship that we can build upon. I I literally, my husband works at Raytheon. I handed him an envelope once. I said, I don't care. Just walk up and down the hallway until you find somebody that looks like they'll be willing to look at this letter, right? And he did, because he's a good guy. So so really thinking about this, and I think that it's really tempting to be like, oh, that sounds so like it sounds so forceful, it sounds so needy, but it's effective. It's effective because everybody in that room is hearing who I've committed to reach out to. Everybody's hearing that I'm reaching out. If you sit, the email approach is too easy to say, well, somebody else will do it. Or I do kind of know somebody there, but I'm guessing that somebody else knows, someone higher up. Let's just take the time to do it. Even if it takes an hour, it's worth it. Also at that time, asking the committee, who am I missing? Who's not on the list? Right? And that's when they might be thinking about either A, again, their own affiliations outside of the list, who they know. Well, my neighbor works in the mailroom at this company and they're not on your list. So, thinking about like using the time in the committee to really, really hone in on this. And what this does as well is it allows the staff to focus on 10 volunteers as opposed to 50 potential sponsors, right? So what you're doing now is you're saying, oh, hey, Angel, what's happening with these? We've heard from these people. Congratulations, great job. But we haven't heard from these folks. Have you reached out to them? Have you had any luck? Did you get any response either way? And so when we're assigning our volunteers, again, hopefully they have a relationship. Maybe they're willing to make the first ask, but they absolutely should be willing to follow up and close the sponsorship. That's part of it. That it's really important. And I think we all know how important it is to have volunteers who are willing to do that. Okay. Whew. So next up, this is all again in kind of the planning phase, is having a process in place for when you get the yes, right? And what do I mean by that? So I mean that you have a confirmation ready to go that maybe is asking, do we need an invoice? That you're collecting the logo. I feel like it's so important that we get the right logo, the right spelling of their name. If they want the Inc. to show up or the LLC to show up or what have you, let's get it the way that they want it, not the way that we think they want it. Confirm what benefits they're going to use. Start to gather guest names, and then to be tracking the attendance, who's coming. And this is a key, as you probably all know, to exceeding those goals is a lot of sponsors don't show up. They don't have people that are going to come resell those tickets. Ask them, maybe that's part of your confirmation. What would you like us to do with these tickets? That's fine. You don't have to send anybody. Would you like us to sell them again? Would you like us to invite community members? Would you like to invite other people? What are they going to do with those tickets? It makes me so sad when I go to an event and there's empty tables there because they assumed that XYZ sponsor was showing up because they bought a table and they never followed up to see that they weren't. So that's the other downside to not doing that is at the event, you end up with empty seats. So, and having this in place before you start doing the sponsorships, sending out the sponsorships, so that as soon as you're getting yeses, you're prepared to send the information. It's too easy to get a backlog, and then you're a couple weeks out, you realize that 5 of your sponsors aren't coming to the event, and now you are scrambling to fill those spots. The sponsorship, I think the nice designed things, these are great, but what's really key is a nice letter and a nice form to go with this. I'm a strong proponent of this, and I'm going to just talk through what I feel like should be included in that letter. A personalized letter. Let's stop doing dear friends, and put people's names on it, who we intend them to go to, assuming that we know this information. Share what the funds raised at the event are going to accomplish. It's going to feed so many people. It's going to help with adoptions. It's going to provide scholarships. Even if it's vague, just what are we doing with these funds? Making a really specific request. So not, again, when I get a letter that says, Dear friends, and it says, we hope you'll sponsor our event this year, what it tells me is that you photocopied a letter that you're sending to every single person, as opposed to, Dear Angel, last year you sponsored at this level. Would you sponsor at this level this year? And so that highlighting what they've done in the past. And this one, sometimes people don't remember, but also is a really nice way to get them to increase. Last year, you sponsored at the bronze level. Would you consider a silver level sponsorship this year? That's an easy way to get them to increase. I always like suggesting that you will follow up and a time frame. I think that prompts people to take action because they want to, I don't want to say they want to avoid the follow-up, but they can save themselves some time if they're really thinking of doing it. Well, I don't need them to follow up. I'll just go ahead and take care of this. I like a volunteer signature on the letter, maybe in addition to the ED. And the reason is, again, because it's always nice to see someone else in the community leading by example. And then I think that a trend is happening that I'm not in love with, which is sending by email. I really think mail is important because a lot of these folks are making decisions by committee. And so if you send it by email, it's really easy to get lost. If they're going to a committee and they have a stack of sponsorships, you're less likely to get lost in the fray. I also think that with our cold prospects, that mail is a better way to get their attention. And even if you don't expect them to sponsor, you're getting your name in front of them. And again, if we're sharing what the funds raised will accomplish, they're all of a sudden like, oh, they're doing such great work. Here's work they're doing. They hear about it later, and you're gonna stay top of mind. And I put here, email, I think, is appropriate when the packet is just a formality. They've already said they're going to sponsor, and or they've specifically requested email. And then having a reply form and a link to a reply form online. So a physical reply form and the ability to do it online are key. There's still a lot of companies that have to process a check. They need an invoice. They have to do these things. always say this, did it in my last workshop as well. I will never stop saying the more specific they ask, the more likely you are to get a response. I don't care who you're asking for what. When we ask vague general requests, everybody thinks, well, somebody else will do it. You're not talking to me. When I get a request that's like, Angel, I'd like you to do this. I'm like, oh, okay, that is something I can do, or it's not something. So same thing is true with sponsors. Be specific. Okay, I'm getting kind of into mm, the sort of now we've secured these sponsorships. We know what's happening. We're getting to the event. Here's some things that I feel like are important for delivering a great sponsor experience, which is important to securing a sponsorship again next year and or friends, more sponsorships. So follow, like I said, following through on the benefits. Don't offer things you don't have the capacity to make happen. Acknowledging them appropriately. Again, getting the names correct, getting the logos correct is important. Making people feel appreciated personally. So let's not forget that our sponsors are people too. And so having somebody that's responsible for going to their tables and saying thank you so much, or greeting them, or just knowing who to look out for and making them feel warm and welcome. Considering sponsor-only benefits, so maybe like a little event beforehand or something else that's just special for them. And again, I'm a stickler for details, getting the details correct. The one thing that I'm going to suggest with this is please don't read every single sponsor name aloud. It slows down the event incredibly, and it also waters down that benefit, right? That's a great benefit for your top tier sponsors that maybe they get, and again, it gets watered down. The names become a blur if we're reading all of them, right? We're almost there. And then after after the event, having a stewardship plan. And again, I'm trying to stress that all of this is planning that goes into effect before the event happens, and that you're putting as much of the wheels in motion as possible. Some of it you can't, like you can't send out photos of the event, or you can't prep them before the event. But knowing what you're going to do afterwards. And the reason I think this is really, really key to this is really a key to you're planning your event words, Angel. Planning beforehand what you're going to do is because here's what I know is going to happen is as soon as your event is over, two things are going to occur. One, you're on to the next thing. We even talked about this morning with Kelly. She got a golf tournament 3 months, 2.5 months after her big event, right? You're on to the next thing. And two, you're so tired of this event by this point that you don't want to even think about it again. You've been eating, sleeping, breathing this event for several months. So if you have the wheels in motion beforehand, you have somebody responsible for the stewardship, and you have materials ready to go, then you're more likely to get it done. This is also a wonderful opportunity for volunteers. Thank you notes, writing thank you notes, reaching out, making phone calls to sponsor, and so on is important because this is laying the groundwork for additional sponsorships. And then I want to just talk a little bit about sponsors don't just have to be sponsors. And there's lots of ways they can get involved. And so some things maybe to be on the lookout for are the sponsor, what do I want to say? Like their staff, their employees, their guests are coming, right? So it's the company that's sponsoring, and we were discussing this earlier. And a lot of times they're coming with a free ticket, and so they may or may not make a donation. They may or may not get involved with your mission. Whatever they choose, that's fine. But a couple things to keep in mind are, one, making sure that you have the materials, the resources, the information there in case they are inspired by your mission. They know what to do next. So it might be a signage, placards that say, do you want to learn more about volunteering with us? Scan this QR code. Are you interested in learning more? Schedule a tour. I don't want somebody who's at my event that's inspired, that's wiping tears from their eyes to go home without knowing exactly what they can do next. Because they go home, they're going to do whatever, they're going to get involved in their own life. got to seize the moment. So having something available for here's how you can get involved. Following up with the small fund of needs that come in that are not from a regular donor. So maybe they're doing $25 because they feel like my employers paid for this event. I'm going to make a donation. Follow up with them, give them a sincere thank you, uh, and start to build a relationship. Again, they might just be giving because they feel compelled in the moment, but they might be somebody who can turn into something greater. And then also recognizing that some of your sponsors might be trying out the organization. I had an experience once where there was a big company in the community. They did not go to many organizations events. They were very, very hard to get in front of. They came to, somehow we managed to get them to come to an event and were able from there, they had a great experience at the event. We followed up afterwards, and then they're like, oh, we're going to send volunteers. We're going to build a relationship, and it became a great partnership afterwards. So just like sometimes we think about those small donations leading to major gifts down the line, think about sponsorships as the ability to lead to major partnerships down the line. The relationship doesn't have to end with the event. Lastly, we talked about this a bit at the beginning. Don't forget that you can do program sponsorships, and also a lot of places are getting into multi-event sponsorships, which means you're sending out all of your sponsorship opportunities at one time. The banks especially love this. A lot of companies love this, especially if their sponsorships are coming out of a marketing budget. It allows them to plan better. It allows you to plan better. Gives you a better way to forecast. It's more efficient. I love what I call the choose your own adventure style, which is here's the sponsorship levels for this event. Here's the program sponsorship levels for this event. Check all the ones you want, add it up, or what have you, coming up with different levels. Hey, I heard you talking about that, right? And lastly, to not forget about community and small business sponsorships. So more and more, we want to be inclusive of everybody in the community, and not everybody can afford the $150 ticket to come to your event. Not everybody can afford to buy a table for their friends. And so having a way that local community businesses can get involved without a huge financial obligation is a great way to build relationships. So maybe you have a sponsorship that really just includes signage at the event, and it's $100, or it's a really low entry point, but it's allowing the businesses and community members to feel like they can be a part of it. It's similar to allowing the sponsors to let you invite community members, beneficiaries, or what have you to the event. And also, I feel like gives the event a better feel. It feels a little bit less like, oh, we've got all the biggest companies in the community here, and not necessarily representative of who we all are.